It's now time to introduce our special guest. We're thrilled to have with us tonight Antoinette Ortiz-Sharfin. Antoinette Ortiz-Sharfin grew up next door to her grandfather's farm in a pristine valley in northern New Mexico. After her mother passed away, ending a 12-year battle with breast cancer, she began a healing journey which led her to Alaska, where her husband worked as a commercial longline fisherman, and eventually to the Big Island of Hawaii, where they now run their vegan cafe businesses together, including Herbivores in Kailua Kona. Some of you may have already been there and enjoyed their delicious food. So I think you're in for a treat if you go there, if you haven't been there yet. Antoinette's presentation is entitled From Hunter to Gatherer, an Indigenous Woman's Journey from Omnivore to Vegan, Activist, and Entrepreneur. Please join me in welcoming Antoinette Ortiz-Sharfin.
So never in my wildest dreams did I think I would go vegan. I never even heard the term vegan. And when I did hear the term vegan, I thought they were, automatically hippies, health freaks, or crazy cult members that didn't eat meat. This is my hometown. It's where I was born and raised. It's a small multicultural town located at the base of the Colorado Rockies. Taos is actually the Tewa people's word for place of the red willows. This is the Taos Pueblo. It's actually the oldest inhabited pueblo in the United States. The natives that live in this pueblo still currently have been there for over 1,000 years. There's also a very strong Hispanic and Spanish presence there. They've lived together for about 500 years. So at this point on the journey, things are very cohesive. I never felt a separation growing up in Taos from there was no natives and Spanish people. It was like we were just all one people. You can tell from here we have the Spanish Matachines and the Native American tribal elder leading a ceremony together. The result of the Native Americans and the Spanish people have resulted in a race called the Indio Hispanos, or also mestizos, which is me. My dad's side is Spanish ancestry, and my mom's side has the Native American ancestry. In the 50s and 60s, there was a huge influx of hippies that came to Taos, artists and writers and very eclectic, funky people. In fact, the little village that I grew up in had one of the biggest communes in our town. It's called New Buffalo. Needless to say, there was a very interesting mix of people. So you have the Native Americans, you have the Hispanics and the Spanish people, and you have these funky, wild, hippie people. Which, my family thinks I'm kind of a hippie person, so. So of course, with, all the art and culture comes a passion and richness for food, and the Southwest is actually known to be to have a cuisine that people really, really love. I know we've all seen this before, maybe as a vegan or a non-vegan. This one I actually really love. Because the native peoples, again, they weren't the dominating hunters that we hear about. They were actually very passionate and treasured their plant-based crops. In fact, the Incas farmed potatoes and quinoa. Quinoa was so sacred that Inca chief would actually put the quinoa seed under his tongue to activate the seed with his DNA, so it was so strong and powerful. And then they would actually use a golden spade to dig the dirt to place that seed into it. So that's how important and beautiful plants were to the native indigenous people. The Aztecs actually harvested spirulina, and their children, from what I read, didn't even eat meat until they were about 10 years old. So the children were raised on a lot of spirulina. And of course the Maya, had corn and beans. For us to think that our ancestors and indigenous people just thrived on meat is really not true. There's actually a really cool essay called Native American and Vegetarianism by Rita. That's very beautiful and talks about that, and I think she's Cree. So if you want to read more about that, I recommend that. Natives really were passionate about the three sisters, which were corn, beans, and squash. That was their staple foods, and they were collectively known as the three sisters. These crops were planted together, and my grandpa actually did this too. It was really cool. So you would plant corn in the fields, and then you would plant the beans next to them, so the corn would be used for the beans to grab onto as a way to climb. And then of course the squash, which we called calabacitas, which just means little squash, was planted, and the vines would create weed control, and the little prickly leaves on the squash would actually deter like raccoons and stuff for coming, because it would poke their little paws. Together, these three sisters provided sustainable soil fertility and a healthy diet. Beans, are a huge source of protein. Like, we always hear that, protein, and beans are a very, very powerful source. So they definitely knew what they were doing. They actually believed that these plants were a gift from the gods, always to be eaten together and celebrated together. In the mid-1500s, the Spanish invaded Mexico, and they had a great influence on the Native American diet. Also, animals such as pigs and cows and sheep were introduced. Even cheese and rice and garlic and onions were brought in, and that evolved into what is the southwestern cuisine that we know today. This is me. I was born in the 70s, and both my mom and dad worked a lot when I was growing up and didn't cook much at home. In fact, my mom, looking back, she didn't like to cook at all. When she did cook, she cooked very heavy meat-based foods like pork chops and roasts and big like slabs of bologna. And I love my mom, bless her heart and all that, but she just didn't like to cook. So I also grew up on a lot of processed food, sandwiches and ho-hos and all this crazy stuff, because my dad had the sweet tooth and was kind of a junk food guy. I grew up eating a lot of that stuff. And when my mom did cook, like I said, she used a lot of meat, and a lot of that meat was actually harvested and taken from animals who were raised and slaughtered next door at my grandpa's farm. In my family, several of my cousins and my uncles were hunters, hunting mostly deer and elk. That's what a lot of people hunt back in New Mexico. My dad was not a hunter. In fact, my dad is a very sensitive, kind man, and he was just out here last year, and he ate at my cafe, and I tried to talk to him about veganism and stuff, and it's kind of challenging because it's, he's just been living this way for so long, and it's just so hard. But I'm like, Dad, you're so sensitive and you couldn't kill animals. How can you eat them? So my dad wasn't a hunter, but what we did do together was river fish for rainbow trout. That's kind of a big thing back home. There's a lot of rivers and streams. As a kid, I actually loved to fish. It was something that I would even do by myself. As I got older, I had my own tackle box, and I would take my boyfriends fishing. They wouldn't take me fishing, I'd take them fishing. I just loved it. Actually, I don't know, I think it's a memory that I have when I first went with my dad. I remember I cast my line into the river, and it went under this bridge, and I felt this snag, and I pulled this huge rainbow trout. It was big for what I caught. But it was this, over a foot big rainbow trout. And my dad was like so excited. He just was so proud of me. And there was something about that connection that I made with my dad in that moment, having him be really proud that I had done this, that maybe that's why I kept doing it more. He was just so excited for me. I didn't have any trouble gutting the fish, cleaning the fish, and I actually became quite passionate about fishing and for a long time until I became vegan. Like I said, a lot of kids back home are taught very young how to fish, and it's like a fun thing to do. It's like I see pictures of my sister taking my nieces, and it's kind of heartbreaking, because I feel like we're teaching children at a very, very young age how to basically kill animals and maybe not really think about it. One of the things I thought about too is like fish don't scream and you can't hear them suffer. So I think that's a reason why it's okay for kids to do that. I know for me, if I would have heard fish suffer, I probably would have not been so excited about it. I couldn't find a picture of my grandpa's actual farm, but this photo is literally a couple fields down from my grandpa's farm. It's located just outside of Taos, and he had about 10 acres when we were growing up, and all my family lived, on it. Several uncles and aunts, and of course us. He was a farmer, like I said, who raised animals for food. He had cows, pigs, and lambs. He had the pristine farm that we all hear about. The animals raised there were free to roam in the fields. They ate beautiful emerald green grass. They drank water from hand-dug irrigation ditches that were fed from the melted snow from the Rocky Mountains. So these animals lived like the life. They really couldn't have been any better way, except they definitely had an unfortunate ending. Every day after school, the school bus would drop me off at my grandpa's house, and because my parents worked. I used to love to go out to see the animals. I would go out back and I'd feed the pigs and I'd feed the sheep, and one of my chores was to herd the cows from my uncle's yard, which is like a couple hundred yards away, and I'd bring him back to my grandpa. So I had this connection and really loved being close to the animals. The cows were always really cool. My aunt told me a story one time that there was actually a cow on my grandpa's farm that loved my grandpa so much that she was actually jealous of my grandma when she would come by. My grandpa also had about 15 sheep at a time, and I used to love to hear them. You would hear them doing their little sounds in the fields. I used to pick long blades of grass and feed them through the fence, and they'd all come up, just so trusting. I loved the pigs too, and I remember feeling sad. They were actually confined to a small pen. Even being on the beautiful, pristine, free-range farm, they lived in a pen. But I would also, feed them. I'd climb up the wooden walls of the pens and feed them scraps from my grandma's kitchen and grain, and I was just fascinated to see them eat. I love to see them eat. I have a particular memory of a baby piglet that was going to be raised for food. My grandpa had bought it from another farmer down the road, and me and my mom and dad went to go and pick it up. And we were sitting in the back of my uncle's truck, and we're taking the pig back to my grandpa's, and it's tiny, this little piglet, and I'm just like, of course I'm in love. I'm like 8 years old, right? And I'm just like loving it and just so excited. And my mom tells me, she's like, don't get too connected. Don't get too connected to this animal because it's gonna be killed. You can't keep it as a pet. And I was just like, okay, but the words hit hard, and I thought to myself, like, it was going to be for food only. And looking back, it was almost like I had to bury my compassion. I had to disconnect from my feelings of compassion to these animals, to the feelings that I had for them. I had to separate myself. So I thought that was really interesting. So this is an actual picture of my dad and my two uncles. My dad's on the far right. Every fall, my family would have a huge community gathering called the Matanza. And the Matanza is literally Spanish for slaughter. It was a huge feast day, and the whole community would come and partake in the Matanza. I love community gatherings, and I loved seeing the community come together, but it just was horrible because the reason why was there was an animal being killed. I remember as I got older, I'm not sure what happened, but we wouldn't go to the Matanza until after the animal was killed. I remember we'd find out it was the animal, the deed had been done, and then my mom would take us down to my grandpa's house. I'm wondering if maybe I suppressed a memory or something like that, because I don't know why they would keep me and my sister home and not let us, be part of it. But nevertheless, I preferred, the part of the Matanza that was singing and guitar playing and all the things that crazy Spanish men do. It was really fun to do that, and that's the part that I loved. So I have one memory of a Matanza. They were going to kill a cow that day, And it was me and my mom, and we were in the back of my uncle's truck. And I could feel like something was wrong. You could tell that the animals were stressed. The cows were like running through the fields, and there was a like uneasiness in the air. So again, my grandpa would shoot the cow from a long distance. That's how he killed them. And it was almost like they knew what was going to happen. And again, this is a small farm. This is like the most humane way that that we think animals can be killed. And there was still a tension and an uneasiness that was happening. I remember saying to my mom, that it was really sad that the animals had to die. And she acknowledged that, and she said, yes, it's sad that the animals have to die. But she said this with sincerity. And I know we hear this and we can get triggered as vegans, but she said, God put these animals here on the planet for us to eat. We need to eat them to be healthy. If we don't eat them, we're not going to be healthy. And I just remember thinking like, wow, that's a bummer, But she said that with all sincerity, and that was her belief 100%. And I just accepted it as truth. So I remember just, totally accepting it. Another memory I have is my grandpa killing a lamb. He strung it up by its hind legs and put it on this like wooden beam while it was fully conscious. So this lamb is like struggling. And my grandpa like slit its throat, totally fully conscious, and this like waterfall of blood pours out from this animal. And I'm standing there, and I'm probably about 8 or 9, 10, and I'm totally frozen. I can't move my legs. I'm totally freaking out. And I remember I finally was able to feel my legs, and I ran to my grandma's house. But I didn't tell anybody anything because I had learned that this was natural, this was necessary, this was what was needed to happen. So I didn't want to come in and say what I had seen or show that I was upset, because to me, I thought I need to be strong. This is just crazy that I'm feeling sad about this, or. And I also kind of thought to myself, like, I have to eat these animals, so I can't feel sad about it. I do want to say that, I don't feel like my family were these horrible people, and I don't feel that meat eaters are horrible people, and I don't feel that farmers are horrible people. We have a lot to learn and a lot to unlearn, and we've been told a lot of stories, and I just, my grandpa didn't enjoy killing animals, and like I said, my dad could never even be a part of it, so it's not like it was this big hurrah of, killing animals. And in fact, my grandpa, he was very, very strict. When we would eat dinner at his dinner table, sometimes my cousins, we'd all be there and we'd start joking around and kicking each other under the table and stuff and laughing. And my grandpa would just give you this like eye of like death, like, don't you laugh at the table. It was like something, like it was so serious, He knew that he had to take an animal's life, and it was like there was nothing funny about it in front of, eating like that. So it was very, very serious. At the time, I didn't analyze that obviously when I was a kid, but looking back now, I feel like that's what it had to be. At the time, I just thought Grandpa was just old and grouchy. In addition to raising animals for food, my grandpa had fruit trees and vegetable gardens, and he grew peas and corn and squash. This isn't a real picture of me and my cousins, but it could very well be, except there'd be like 30 more of us. But we loved to play in the garden. We would go and, it was just so natural to be gardening plants, You're playing in the dirt, and it's so lovely, and it just feels good. You're working with the earth and the water and the soil. We love to go into the gardens. In fact, I remember my grandpa would get mad because we would go and pick the snow peas too early off the vine, and he would yell at us, "Stop picking the snow peas, they're not ready yet." And he couldn't see us because we were small, and he'd be on the porch, and he knew we were out there, and he'd be yelling into the field. And I think this is where my entrepreneurial spirit was born, because me and my cousins would go and pick tons of apples and peas and cherries, and we'd set up a table in front of my grandpa's house, and then we'd try to sell it to cars passing by. So that was really fun. This is me and my grandpa. He and I were really, really close. We would talk on the phone for about an hour once a month. He passed away before I went vegan. I went vegan in December of 2012, and he passed away in September. So we never had a chance to talk about my lifestyle, and I would have loved to talk to him because he was very open-minded and he was really sharp and intelligent, even till his last day. I really would love to know what he'd have to say about it. Some of my family aren't too supportive. I have an aunt that, you know, when I post stuff on Facebook, she kind of gets defensive and says I'm talking bad about my family, and you know, so it hasn't gone totally great with everyone, but I think my grandpa would have definitely been open-minded to it. He passed away in 2012 at the ripe old age of 102.
Wow.
Yeah, he was awesome. And like I said, he was super sharp, super sharp.
But he was not vegan.
No.
He lived to be 102.
Yeah. But his wife, my grandma, she died at 67, and she had type 1 diabetes, and she shot up insulin all day long, the poor woman, you know, so yeah. So I guess it can go either way sometimes, you know. This is me and my mom when I was a little girl. She was diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 35. It was a really stressful part of my life in childhood. She battled the disease for 12 years before she passed away. She was 47. During her 12 years of this battle, it was only when she went to a clinic in Mexico that we learned about nutrition. Not once did any of her doctors here in the States ever bring up nutrition at all. You know, I wish we would have learned about the plant-based diet. I'm not saying that she'd still be alive. Who knows, but I wish we would have known about it. I try not to go there because I don't want to have any regrets and sadness, but it would have been nice to know. She went to Mexico when she was deemed incurable here in the States, and that's when she started to learn about nutrition. She found a place called the Oasis of Hope. She went on a really strict organic diet. That's what they really stressed. It was organic, nothing out of a box, nothing out of a can, everything fresh, like no processed food, no milk, no dairy, no eggs, and only a little bit of meat was allowed. And we did that. We all adhered to her diet to support her, and it was no problem at all. When she passed, I still ate like that because I wanted to honor her. So I was very passionate about organic and, you know, local raised and all that kind of stuff. When she passed, I actually fell into a very dark depression, and I suffered from severe panic attacks and OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. On top of this, I had just given birth to my daughter about a year before my mom died. So I'm totally stressed out. I actually lost my job. I couldn't drive. I rarely left my house. I couldn't even get off the couch. I remember like barely having energy to get off my couch and like go to the bathroom. I couldn't even move. So it was really, really, really tough. So that put me on a healing journey. One thing with panic attacks is you think you're having a heart attack, right? So I'm like obsessed about heart attacks. And so I start to learn and read, and I'm learning about cholesterol and red meat and how that's bad for your heart. So I start cutting all of these things out. And interestingly enough, I was eating a mostly plant-based diet, but I had no idea what it was. So after my mom died, John and I decided to move to Alaska. John was a commercial fisherman up there and had spent many seasons working in the industry before we got married. When we got married, he talked about moving up there, but with my mom being sick and me having a brand new baby, I was not ready to move to Alaska. It was just too far, and my mom's health was not stable enough. But once my mom passed, I thought, I was ready to get out. I just wanted something new. I wanted to try something different. When we moved to Alaska, Luna was about 2 years old. During this time, thankfully, I was able to be a stay-at-home mom. I was fortunate enough to be able to rest and heal and work on myself through my mom's passing. Being that I stayed at home a lot, I started to learn how to cook more meals. Cooking to me felt like an art project. I loved going online and finding recipes and cooking food for Luna and John. It kind of was therapeutic for me. It gave me a lot of joy during my healing process, just being able to cook meals. So we lived in Alaska for 3 years. We basically lived off of crab and fish as well, of course. Of course, the fish was fish that John had killed, or I used to go fishing in the swimming hole, which was a salmon fishing hole. And in fact, I was obsessed with salmon. I loved it dried, smoked, jarred, canned, you name it. I lived off salmon, so I never thought I would be able to give it up. Here's kind of a funky picture, but it's me where I'd caught a salmon at the fishing hole. I used to love to go down there and snag when they were doing the runs. The last year that we lived in Alaska, I had the opportunity to visit the Pacific Northwest, where John's boat was docked at the end of the season. This was the first time that I got a chance to check out some of the little sweet coffee shops and bakeries. The Northwest actually has a lot of little drive-through coffee shops, and that's kind of what we have now in Kona at Herbivores. It's a little kind of drive-through kiosk. So when we would visit these little coffee shops, we'd always think, oh, this is so cute. John is a coffee junkie, and I loved pastries, and so we thought it'd be so fun to have a bakery one day. So the move to Hawaii came like many stories that we hear. We came here on vacation, fell in love, and came back to create a life. In February of 2005, we came on a 6-week vacation, and I fell in love. It was quite the contrast to Alaska and New Mexico, but it was also similar in so many ways. It's isolated. It's kind of like the 3 last states, the baby states of the US. The strong sense of community, and of course the strong native presence. We decided that we were going to go back to Alaska and do one more fishing season and then come back. And that November, we were back living here. During our first few years in Hawaii, John continued to go to Alaska to do his commercial fishing job. But every year seemed to get more and more stressful. We just got tired of being apart. Luna was getting older and was missing her dad, and he'd be gone for months at a time. And back then there was no cell phone like there is today, so I wouldn't talk to him for 5 weeks sometimes, and it was really hard. So we decided to call it quits, and we started a remodel construction business because he had a background in that and was really good at that too. So we did that. And then in 2011, that's when our adventure in food began. That's my husband. He's actually here tonight, but I told him to just kind of go because if he was in here, he was going to make me nervous. So we found a bakery that was going out of business in Kona, south of Kona, where we live on the Big Island, and we thought it would really be fun to take it over as a family. John comes from a Jewish family, and he had talked about making bagels before. Like he had this dream in his early 20s to have a bagel shop, and never did it. But we thought, this would be a perfect opportunity to make bagels and pastries and sandwiches and smoothies and all that good stuff. The only bad thing was we never made a bagel in our lives. And we made this huge sign, and it said, New York bagels coming soon, and we put it on the side of the road, and we had never made a bagel. And so, thank goodness for YouTube, we found a recipe, and our first ones were completely hideous. They were so bad. We were so nervous. We thought, what are we gonna do? People are gonna be so onto us. But, we like to fake it till we make it. That's one thing about me and John, we go for it. And actually, we ended up having legit New Yorkers come in and be like, we see your sign, what are these bagels? And then they would try them and be like, wow. So we totally pulled it off. We also had no experience running a food business and no culinary education at all. What we did was, we had a very deep passion for wanting to work together. We loved to eat out. We loved bakeries, all that stuff. So we figured it would be really fun to do this. One thing about this opportunity was that the owner, the bakery that we were moving into was going out of business. So the owner of the bakery said, come in for 3 months, try it out, do your thing. If you like it, great. If not, go ahead and bail. So I thought, well, that's cool. That's a low risk opportunity for us. So we did that. Again, I was still living with the belief that organic was key and free range and all that stuff. So I thought, let's make this foundation all about that. And that's what we did. So we had organic lattes and organic baked goods and all that stuff. And at this point, the idea of being vegetarian or vegan still hadn't crossed my mind once. But we struggled, John told me, he's like, I didn't really tell you how bad it was, but I was like stealing from, Peter to pay Paul, and like, he's like, I didn't know if we were gonna make it, and I'm glad he didn't tell me because I would have probably been more stressed out. But, and because of the lack of knowledge that we had, we didn't know recipes by heart. We didn't know all these things. So it took us forever to fill our pastry case. I think we timed it one time and it was like 6 hours to fill our pastry case. Now it's like 2 hours. So, it was so hard in the beginning. We were literally working like 16-hour days. That was normal, 7 days a week. And then there was 18 and 20-hour days often. We would be driving home and be falling asleep. We put a futon in the office and would sleep in there just because it was easier than going home. Sometimes we'd sleep in the back of our car because we were just too tired to drive home. So it was pretty brutal. During this time too, the house that we were living in, we discovered it had mold. And I had been sick for a while and I just thought, why am I not getting rid of this cough? And then we discovered it had mold, so we moved out immediately. But then when we did that, now we had no place to live. So we were had this new business, we're basically homeless, we're in debt, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how are we gonna survive? What helped was we didn't have rent, so now we didn't have to worry about that part of money coming in. So, we found a friend was generous enough to let us park in his yard, and he had a palm tree, and we tied our 2 dogs up to the palm tree while we went to work because we had 2 dogs. And we did that. So living in the car lasted about 2 months, and then we ended up being blessed by a wonderful place to move into, which is now our current home. We started to find a little bit of stability in our lives, even though we were still working on average of 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. And this went on for about 2 years. So it was definitely a hard time, yeah. Some of you might be wondering why we stayed and just didn't say, forget it, we're done, but John and I are both very stubborn and we refuse to fail. We're very hardworking. The second is we just didn't want to go back to doing what we were doing. We wanted to be together. We had spent so much time apart when he was a fisherman and we missed each other and we just wanted to be together as a family. His dad had also passed away during those years, and with my mom being gone, we just really valued family. And we thought, we want to spend as much time as we can together. We were homeschooling our daughter, so we were just really, really close. We still are very close. So my vegan awakening. So one day I'm at home and I'm looking at my computer and checking out Facebook. I'm seeing all these posts and stuff, and at first they really triggered me, like they do so many. There may be people in here that are being triggered, I don't know. My friend Alessandra, who is a very passionate vegan back on the Big Island, she's actually the one that inspired me. She is leading a huge cow rescue right now on the Big Island. There's a dairy going out of business and the cows are being sent to slaughter, and she has rescued, I want to say 250 cows she's found homes for. It's amazing. She's just amazing. But she would post stuff, and of course I was getting triggered, and I remember replying that, my grandpa had the small farm and we give thanks and da-da-da-da-da. And so I don't know if anybody's read this book before. Has anybody read this? 4 Agreements? Yeah? So this is one of my favorite books, and I started reading this after she passed because I was having a lot of struggles. In this book, one of the things that stuck with me on my journey was when somebody says something that triggers you, that makes you feel angry, that makes you feel annoyed, that you don't like, that we basically take personal. We have to take a step back and analyze it. Why is this triggering me? Why is this getting to me? And so with the vegan posts, I stepped back and I thought, why is this bothering me? And I realized, that deep inside, I didn't want to be responsible for animals having to die. I didn't like the fact that all this water was being used, and so I had to really step back and analyze that. And so, I did my research, and very shortly after I saw these posts by her, I decided to stop eating all land animals. I was pescatarian for a while, and I think it took me a while to give up eating fish because I had killed many myself, and because my husband, was in the industry, and I was desensitized. I had seen thousands of dead fish, and it didn't bother me, so I didn't have like that compassion towards fish. Now I do. I've learned a lot about fish, and I'm very compassionate towards their suffering as well. But what I finally gave him up was because I was eating mostly plant-based and vegetarian. When I would eat fish, it just tasted awful to me. Like, I would eat it and I'd be like, I could taste like metal and like weird. It was just weird, so I couldn't even eat it anymore. So I just gave it up because I didn't like it. But then shortly, I started to learn about the egg and dairy industries and the honey industries, and I was done with that too. So thankfully, John was on board immediately. He did not fight me at all. And my daughter also didn't fight us, He was super on board right away, and I'm so grateful for that. I have a lot of friends that their partners aren't as open to it, and there's struggles, especially if one has to cook for the other, and I'm very grateful that I don't have to do that. And so we went vegan together. We decided to move our cafe downtown into Kona Town, and we called it Evolution Bakery. It was not 100% plant-based yet. And it was a struggle because we were vegan, but we had this cafe and we're still selling animal products. And I basically felt like a hypocrite, and it was really hard. But we called it Evolution because we knew eventually we were going to evolve into a 100% plant-based business. So, and the thing too is my husband said, we have to be careful. We can't just go 100% vegan right away in this business. I don't know if it'll succeed. If we have some plant-based options, that's better than none, And my husband is more, he's more grounded and less sensitive and emotional, so he was able to just kind of stay focused and on target. Whereas to me, I would have probably said, we have to be vegan, and it would have probably failed, and then we'd be done, So I really am grateful that he was able to keep me focused and strong. As time went by, though, I started to learn more and more. I met Dr. Will Tuttle. I don't know if you know Dr. Will Tuttle from the World Peace Diet, author of the World Peace Diet. I heard his talks, and he actually stayed with us at our home when he came to Kona. His book just really inspired me about all the ramifications that animal agriculture has on our forests, on our land, on our brothers and sisters, on all of our resources. It was just it was no longer about compassion for animals, because that's what it was for me immediately. It was just about the animals. And then I started to learn more about how these businesses, poisoning the streams and stuff. So I started to learn more and more about that. And so finally, I just kept begging John, like, can we please not do this anymore? I watched Cowspiracy, we did all that stuff, and it was really hard. So finally, John started to become more and more disturbed as well. In 2015, we came here to Oahu and we went to the Peace Cafe and to Loving Hut. And it was the first time I had ever been in an actual 100% plant-based business. And I just thought, oh my God, like, this is so cool. It was so inspiring. And I just begged John, like, can we please do this? So when we went back to the island, there was a little tiny space next door to our bakery. It was connected, and we used that for like storage and stuff. And we decided to use that space to create a 100% plant-based menu. We would just do dinner, try it out, because we thought if it fails, well, we're already paying rent for the space. We pay electricity for the space. It's a low risk, opportunity or venture. So we did that, but it was challenging. We had to make this little makeshift kitchen, and it was hot. I remember the cook that we had at the time was like dying. He's just like, it's so hot back here. And it was so crazy. And then we shared space with the pizza guys. So at night, we shared our space with the pizza restaurant, and they would come in. So all of a sudden we have like the pizza guys here, and we're doing this vegan thing here, and like we're sharing the same commercial kitchen in the back, washing our dishes, and things are going really good, we're getting great business and stuff, but it was hard, like, sharing this space with these guys, I love them, don't get me wrong, but it was like, oh my gosh. Finally, John decides to transition Evolution to be 100% plant-based. So about a year later, we closed the doors to Evolution Bakery, and we told everybody we were going on vacation for a week. And actually what we were doing was we were revamping the menu. We were changing everything, but we didn't want to tell people that because we thought if we tell them, oh, we're going to have a plant-based menu, they wouldn't come back. So we closed the shop and we figured, we'll let them come in, and then while we have them in here, we'll try to sell them on the plant-based items. So we did that and it went amazing. Sales went up. People were coming in. People were very open to the plant-based menu. Veganism had already also started to kind of become of a mainstream word, so people were very open to it. So it was like perfect timing. So it was awesome. So now we have, Evolution's 100% vegan. We got Aipono at night, which is 100% vegan. We're doing breakfast, we're doing dinner, and it's going awesome. And then about a couple years later, we see this little kiosk up the road from Evolution. I told my husband, I used to always drive by and say, if I could have that little space, I would make a little vegan drive-through, and it would be amazing. I drive by and I noticed it's vacant. I used to look at it every day. I would drive by. And one day I drive by and I noticed that the tenant that was there, he's gone. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I tell John immediately, I'm like, the little place, it's available, we gotta go. And so we called the property manager. They didn't even have a for rent sign on it yet, but we knew who was leasing the space. And we called them up and said we were interested. And they said, okay, we can come look at it. So we went and looked at it, and of course they want to know, what are you going to do here, right? They want to make sure that whoever they rent to has a successful idea. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't tell them I want to have a vegan cafe. They'll never rent it to me. They'll be like, what? So I said, I want to have a healthy cafe drive-through. And that was my little sneaky word to get in. So I said, I want to have smoothies and healthy sandwiches, and and they were like, oh, that sounds great, So they gave it to us, and we learned later that there was actually quite a few people that wanted this space, so we were really, really lucky to get it. It's right off of a busy highway. It has great parking. It's super visible. I mean, it is just like the perfect little spot. And what I love about it too is when that's our drive-through window. When you're standing and you look out, if I look to my right, I can see McDonald's, and when I look left, I see Starbucks. So we're kind of like this little thorn right in between them that I feel is like creating a wedge in this system. And it's really popular. It's doing so good. We ended up opening Herbivores, is what we called it. I love the name. I thought, it's fun, it's funky. The gorillas are our closest animal relative, and they live solely off plants, and they're super strong. The thing that I liked about it too was it kind of was cartoony in a way, kind of like McDonald's is, and like Wendy's and Burger King. They all have this kind of like cartoony like mascot going on. So I thought we need to have our vegan mascot going on. It is doing amazing. So I want to share with you some of the items that we sell. I tend to lean to a whole food diet, not a lot of processed stuff, very low oils. I went gluten-free about 4 years ago. So we have a lot of that. The other thing though that we do offer are bridge foods, I like to call them. Foods that people are familiar with, because when people hear about vegan food, they think sprouts and salads and bland and twigs and all that stuff. And what we want to do is show them like, hey, you can come in and have melty, cheesy, delicious food that is vegan, we use a lot of local produce. Our lettuce farmer is a veganic lettuce farmer, so he doesn't use any animal products in his soil. And he has the most beautiful lettuce. Like, we're so lucky to have him to provide that for us. So this is our nachos, which is our bestseller. People come and just walk up and ask for the nachos. And I was like, how do people know this? So I actually went to Google and did a search. Everybody's recommending the nachos. They're like, you gotta try the nachos. So they're made from jackfruit. And what we do is we put them in the crock pot and we let them cook all night long. And we use liquid smoke and garlic and some barbecue sauce and basically make a pulled pork with it. And I'm not kidding, non-vegans, vegans, they all think they're just wow, it's so good. We use organic black beans, we use organic corn tortilla chips, our tomatoes are Hamakua grown, our lettuce is organic. We also make our own cashew cheese sauce, which is made with organic cashews. We make our own sour cream. So a lot of it is homemade, from scratch. This is our chickpea tuna salad. I used to love eating albacore tuna, and I would make tuna fish salads with it. Chickpea is amazing. Like, you just have to add a little bit of the nori flakes. It's so delicious. It is like 100 times better than fish. I'm not kidding you. Yeah, so this is another one of our really popular dishes. We also offer like a classic style hamburger and a chicken burger. We use Field Roast, which is a really popular vegan business. They make a lot of like the vegan meat products, and we use Gardein, which is also another popular business that makes vegan meats. So we have a chicken burger, we have a Field Roast burger, we make our own rice paper bacon. People love that stuff. I've had people they want to buy it like extra. Can I get 4 sides of your bacon? And we're like, no, it's too hard to make. We also have a taro burger, the Kauai taro burgers. We offer that too, which people really love. This is, I know it's kind of a weird picture, but my husband was eating this one day, and I was like, I gotta get a picture of it. So we do kind of like a vegan version of, the sausage egg McMuffin from McDonald's. It's basically the English muffins. We use a Gardein sausage patty. We make our own little tofu eggs. We use the Himalayan black salt, which has a very sulfuric smell to it and taste. And this thing is so popular. I mean, we get like full-on meat eaters that come in and try this, and they're just like, what? It's amazing. And then we melt chow cheese on it too. So that's really popular. This is our walnut taco. It's basically walnuts with local avocado to make a meat. And then of course we put it on our veganic lettuce leaves with our cashew sour cream, sesame seeds. We put our nacho sauce on there too. This is really yummy. We started doing dinner about maybe a year ago, because we were just doing breakfast and lunch. We started doing dinner, and then we introduced pizza. We bought these little portable pizza ovens called rock boxes. We make about 6 different pizzas. They're super, super popular. This is like a traditional like Hawaiian style, so we use our pulled pork, jackfruit. We make our own mozzarella cheese with cashews. It melts, it's so good. We put the pineapple on there. We have one that's called a meat lovers, but we're actually changing that. We're gonna call it the animal lovers on our new menu. And that's basically like Gardein sausage and our rice paper bacon and the chicken. Got quite a few of those items. So, but the pizzas are taking off. They're doing so well, and people are loving them. It's great. We also make baked goods at our bakery to provide for herbivores. These are some of our cinnamon rolls, which are huge. They're amazing. We make donuts that are baked, so they're kind of healthier. We make cakes. One thing people think again about vegan plant-based foods is that they're bland and boring and you can't make beautiful food with them, but it's just so not true. It's amazing what you can do. I make a lot of cheesecakes that are cashew based. These are actually raw, so they're not even baked, but they're just so fun to make. To me, it's like an art project, I just love getting creative and coming up with all these different ideas and decorating them, and it's so beautiful and compassionate, no suffering is involved, or less suffering, I mean, the world's not perfect. I don't know what kind of industries are behind cashew farming or anything like that, but if we can make steps forward, but I love cooking with this. This is our little seating area. So we have 4 tables that we seat 6, and then we have 2 6-tops, so we can squeeze people in there. Each table has information on it. People have sent us, I have a friend that works for PETA that sent me coloring books and keiki magazines, and we printed out, protein sources. I made our own little pamphlet that tells people why we're vegan, gives them our reasons for being vegan, what has inspired us along the way. So people can sit there and read them if they want, or they don't have to, it's there for people to check out. There's no pressure. We're not, but we want to use this as a platform. We figure if people are sitting here eating, why not provide this information, I would think would be silly not to. This is our walk-up window. As you can see, we share a lot of vegan info. We actually had a lady that came in about 2 weeks ago, and it was so funny because she told our girl working, she said, the chicken burger that you have, that's real chicken, right? And we said, no, it's not. And she goes, well, the tuna sandwich that I had yesterday, is that tuna? And we said, no, it's not. And she goes, oh, she goes, I've been coming here forever, and I had no idea that this was not. And she goes, but it's all good, I'll order anyway. And I just thought it was funny because, you know, we have all this information, and she didn't notice, which is cool, because on the other spectrum, sometimes we get criticized by people that come and they say, oh, you know, it was good food, but they're just too preachy, and they're just, you know, have a lot of info that's really preachy. And I'm like, we had somebody come that didn't even know we were plant-based, so it's just all about personal perspective, I guess. This is kind of one of our reviews. You know, we had the jackfruit nachos and we're blown away by how good they were, and we're not vegan, vegetarian by any means. Highly recommend. I always love when we get the meat. I mean, of course I love when vegans come and love our food, of course. But when we get the meat eaters to love it, it's just like, it just gives me so much inspiration, you know, to keep going. And then this one, I'm not vegan or vegetarian, but I enjoyed the barbecue jackfruit sandwich, so amazing. You know, we have a lot of awesome reviews. Definitely keeps me inspired. The food industry is not easy. It's a lot of work. It's so hard. You know, I'm not a morning person. My husband has to like drag me out of bed sometimes because I'm just like, I don't want to get up. But, you know, I think about why we're doing this, and then that inspires me. You know, I couldn't do it otherwise. If it wasn't for the animals and the environment and helping people, like, I wouldn't do it. But I think it's a beautiful platform to do some good work, you know? And so moving forward, my vision is to hopefully one day open a plant-based cafe in my hometown of Taos. I would love to show people, you know, what the food tastes like. I have a lot of family members that want to know what it's like. You know, they constantly want to try it, friends back home. The other thing that John and I are talking about is talking to a franchise lawyer and seeing about franchising Herbivores, because we have so many people that come in and say, God, I wish we had one of these in Portland, and this is better than anything I've had in San Francisco, you know? So we really feel like there could be a market to do this, and it could, you know, it can provide a really cool business for some of these really cool, like, for anybody, you know, it's easy, it's not hard to do. And we have gone through the ringer and can totally show people what we've learned and you know, I think be of really good service for that. One last thing I just want to say is that back on the island, I'm very grateful for our local community, you know, our local Native community as well, for just totally embracing us with open arms. We have so much support. You know, being a Native myself, you know, you can always be a little standoffish to anything new, anything that changes the status quo, anything that challenges your traditions and your beliefs. And so for me, having this, you know, has been very, you know, I have to walk a very fine line where I'm very passionate about something, but I also have to be respectful and understand that I was there once too, and you know, we're all just hopefully learning together, and we'll make these connections. But I'm really grateful, and I hope to share this with more people, and I hope one day maybe I'll see you there. Thank you.
Mahalo to all of you for coming tonight. Have a safe return home. Good night, everyone.